Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that introduction, Callie, and thank you for what you mean to this city. And by the way, your husband, T-Bone Burnett, thank you for organizing this amazing music here today. What a wonderful celebration. All of the musicians, thank you very, very much. Good afternoon, everyone. It is really a deep honor to be here with you to celebrate the memory of such an inspirational and transformative figure, a man I was proud to call my friend, John Lewis. And as a recovering politician, I want to add not friend, real friend. This is an inspiring and wonderful gathering, and what an honor to be in the presence of these civil rights heroes. God bless you all, and thank you for inspiring us with your lives and your hearts. What a privilege to hear from John's mentor, James Lawson, and we're going to hear from him again, and from John's distinguished biographer, Nashville's own John Meacham, who is a master of what he has called the moral utility of history, and from so many others. I want to also acknowledge with gratitude Mayor John Cooper and Deputy Mayor Brenda Hayward and Congressman Jim Cooper and Councilwoman at Large Zulfat Swara. And it was your idea to start to do this, wasn't it, originally? And thank you very much for that. And Senator Gilmore and members of the Lewis family, the organizing committee, and others, thank you so much for asking me to participate. It's hard to believe that it has been a year since his passing, a year to the day. John Lewis was, of course, a towering figure who left his indelible mark on history with the moral clarity and the unbreakable courage with which he lived his life. He was a teacher of justice and of nonviolence. He was a fearless truth teller. He changed hearts. He was a leader, a real leader. And as we reflect on his legacy here today, I also hold in my heart the life and legacy of his brilliant advisor and partner in life, his beloved Lillian, and I want to acknowledge her today. As many have noted already here today, John talked often about how Nashville shaped him, but obviously there's no question that he shaped Nashville, and I want to echo Reverend Lawson in saying this event can be the emergence of a new Nashville. We have work still to do. And John Lewis shaped the lives of so many people who have called Nashville home. I count myself among that group. He was a moral leader and teacher to me throughout my career from before the days I had a career. It was an honor for John to nominate me to be vice president at the 1992 Democratic Convention. I asked him to do that because he's John Lewis. But as many who have joined us today in this historic Ryman know well, the true privilege of knowing John was to be able to collaborate with him and learn from him. Before I ever met him, I felt his impact and that of Reverend Lawson and Kwame Lillard and C.T. Vivian and Diane Nash and so many others, many of them already mentioned, because I was a teenager following the dramatic events on the street now properly named for him, and later on during my time as a reporter for the Nashville Tennessean. Throughout the city and certainly in our newsroom, the topics of racial justice, equality, and nonviolent protest were always front of mind. Our editor, the late John Sigenthaler, named among the heroes of the civil rights movement, and his son is here. John Sigenthaler was a friend and lifelong admirer of John Lewis. I was not infrequently at dinners with the two of them when John was in town. A decade after the good trouble that began in part here in Nashville, a generation of students, activists, and community leaders were following in John's footsteps, holding sit-ins, as you've heard, all across the South and all across the country, strikes, marching to demand fairness and justice. And the roots of social progress in Nashville took hold in significant measure because of the work of John Lewis and Reverend Lawson and so many others. I'm proud that Nashville has a claim to be one of the real centers of the civil rights movement in the United States of America. We respect Atlanta and some of those other places, but hey, Nashville is where the momentum really gained critical mass. And when they were almost out of gas down in Alabama, there were all the buses that came from Nashville and all the students, and revivified that movement and brought it a second breath. I want to also recall for all of you that you know this, but I want to call it out here. John Lewis was a very skilled legislator in the Congress. He accomplished a great deal on the streets and in the halls of decision-making in Washington. Working with him there in the U.S. Capitol, and later when I became vice president, it was always abundantly clear why John earned the title so many gave him, the conscience of Congress. It was almost like John Lewis, the conscience of Congress, is like his full name in Washington. But I would argue that he was even more than that. For those who listen carefully, even those who listened carefully and then were afraid themselves to follow where he led, he was the conscience of the United States of America. He led us, and we still have a ways to go to catch up with him. He saw through the divisive politics and the rhetoric that's long been used to drive us apart, and instead he focused on identifying what unites us as Americans and as human beings. In doing so, he never wavered for standing up what he knew in his heart and soul was true, for what is just. He also understood, by the way, with crystal clarity, the moral urgency of protecting the environment and our climate system, protecting our planet's most vulnerable people. He was one of the preeminent leaders in the civil rights movement in broadening the focus to include environmental racism. He believed fiercely that access to clean air and clean water is not a privilege, it is a right. John and I co-sponsored the first Environmental Justice Act, a bill that he championed in the House and I introduced in the Senate on the same day. We were finally able to enact its provisions as an executive order after I left the Senate and went to the White House, and President Clinton signed it as the first major federal action on environmental justice. John was there by our sides in the Oval Office for that signing, and through the various presidencies that followed, he successfully fought to maintain those policies, and they're still in place today. The previous president, I think, didn't find them and overlooked them, but John continued to champion action on the environment and the climate crisis throughout his career because, as he said just a few years ago, and I quote from John, "Each and every one of us must cherish this planet, for it is likely the only home we will ever know." He said, combating climate change is not a Democratic or Republican issue. It is the question of preserving this little piece of real estate that we call Earth for generations yet unborn. So anyone who has doubts about the climate crisis, listen to the words of John Lewis. He worked hard on it. Our work toward environmental justice, like the work that John did on so many issues that he championed here in Nashville and across the country, that work is far from complete. But his legacy lives and lives on in the work of those who learned from him and in the work that we have yet to do. I saw that impact on students firsthand when I had the privilege in 2001 of teaching a course with John at Fisk University. He was busy in the Congress but made time to teach. I didn't know what in the heck I was going to do at that point in my life, but I knew I wanted to teach with John. He was always cultivating the next new generation of leaders, inspiring and motivating them to carry on the work of justice and progress that he always had in his heart. He knew the impact of transferring his wisdom and his passion for justice to others. And as he often said, the work of justice is not limited to any one person alone. So as we honor John here in Nashville today, we should all commit ourselves to getting into good trouble and doing it together. We must take inspiration from this generation of leaders who have followed in John's footsteps, just like those who weeks ago fought off the environmental racism of the Byhalia pipeline in Memphis, Tennessee. Congratulations to those grassroots activists. Though our challenges are daunting, as John once said, ours is not the struggle of one day, 1 week, or 1 year. Ours is the struggle of a lifetime, or maybe even many lifetimes, and each one of us in every generation must do our part. Now it's time for us to do our part, and I have so much hope in us. And here in Tennessee, we have work to do. We've got to vaccinate people in Tennessee, and we've got to vaccinate teenagers in Tennessee. Given the fact that the death rate from COVID-19 among black Americans is 3 times as high, it is racist not to vaccinate people. So with John and the many others who have come before us in our heart, let us get to work. And if you doubt for a moment that the political will is lacking, just remember always, political will is itself renewable, and I feel it being renewed here in the Ryman today. Thank you, John Lewis.